Hi, everyone. I'm Sheila Katz, CEO of National Council of Jewish Women. I'm so excited to be with you today to launch our 73Forward campaign. Before we start, I want to acknowledge that 3 years ago today, the Pittsburgh Jewish community was targeted by the deadliest act of anti-Semitic violence in our country's history. Our deepest sympathies to Congregation Dor Hadash, Tree of Life or L'Simcha Congregation, New Light Congregation, NCJW Pittsburgh, and to all those affected as we remember the precious lives that were lost too soon. May the memories of all those lost 3 years ago today be for a blessing. In moments like these, it's so important for our community to come together to fight for a better world. Today, on International Religious Freedom Day, we raise our voices in community as proud Jewish people and allies as we launch 73Forward. National Council of Jewish Women chose the name 73Forward in recognition of 1973, the year of the momentous Roe v. Wade decision. This legalized surgical abortion for those who can access it. Roe has always been the floor and not the ceiling. Our work will continue until all people can assert agency over their bodies and their lives. 73Forward honors the dedicated activists, including many NCJW advocates, who have spent decades fighting for reproductive rights, while also calling us together for a renewed, intersectional, intergenerational path forward. The goal of 73Forward is simple: to share a clear, collective, and Jewish framework to increase on-the-ground access to abortion care for anyone who needs it. Together, we will reclaim the narrative by bringing the Jewish voice into the public conversation, sharing loudly and proudly that we are pro-abortion justice. Together, we will advocate for policies that increase abortion access, starting off with the Women's Health Protection Act, which is currently in the Senate and would ensure everyone, regardless of their zip code, including Texas zip codes, can access abortion care. And we will work to remove educational, financial, and legislative roadblocks to medication and self-managed abortion, because this is the best way to make an immediate impact for those seeking abortion care right now. You do not need to identify as Jewish or as a woman to participate. We welcome all advocates and allies to join us in this important moment. During our time together tonight at our kickoff, we're going to hear from some abortion storytellers about their experiences accessing abortion care in the current landscape. We're going to learn with rabbis about why we as a Jewish community support abortion access because of our faith and not despite of it. And we will take action to impact change right now. Now, I hope you'll join me in taking our first action of the night to educate ourselves in our communities. Please follow National Council of Jewish Women, NCJW, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and share our posts that are there right now to educate your friends and combat abortion stigma. And make sure to use the hashtag 73Forward. More actions coming throughout the night.
My name is Denise, and my abortion story is a little bit different every time I tell it. I had an abortion in my early 20s. I was in a relationship that was abusive, and I knew that there was no way that I could bring a child into that environment. I was really lucky that I had such a supportive family. I remember my mom actually sent me flowers on the day of my procedure. And I actually felt really comfortable with the process of having an abortion. I understood a lot about what would happen because I actually worked in reproductive health and rights at the time. But one thing that I wasn't really prepared for was the stigma that I would feel as someone who identified as a proud feminist, getting an abortion in North Carolina. I actually went to college in North Carolina, and that's where I had my abortion procedure. At the time, there was a lot of dialogue happening within our state about waiting periods for folks who are having abortions. So in order to finalize your procedure, you would have to do a counseling session with somebody by phone or in person, and then wait up to 3 days before you could actually have your abortion. And so that process, even though I knew, what was going to be happening, what was expected of me, I knew that sometimes there would be protesters outside the clinic. For me, as a person in an abusive relationship who was trying to leave, who, just really wanted to harness their own agency and feel powerful, it was really frustrating to feel so disempowered because of the way that my state didn't really want to validate my decision to have an abortion. And so even though I had made this decision for myself, I still had to go through the process of having this counseling session with a provider, and then waiting a few days before I could actually have my abortion procedure. I'll say that those few days between were extremely challenging. And I felt, almost angry. I'm really angry, not just at the situation that I was in, but because I didn't really feel like I was able to take full control of my own decision making. I was really lucky. When I had my abortion, insurance covered the procedure. There was a long period of calling back and forth to my insurance provider to figure out if they were going to be able to cover my procedure. And I was really lucky that they were able to do so. In the in-between time when I was waiting on callbacks to hear what would be covered, listening to judgments from people on the phone, I was frantically calling around, trying to figure out, what I might be able to do. Should I put it on my credit card? Should I call my local abortion fund and see if they might be able to support me? It was a pretty stressful time, and obviously the partner that I was with at the time was not by my side through this process. But I was lucky to have some very, very supportive friends who drove me to my appointment, got me junk food to eat afterwards, watched trash TV with me while I hung out in bed for a couple of days, and really ultimately gave me the support that I needed to leave that abusive relationship. I think it's important to share my story as a woman, a person who had an abortion in the South, a Jewish member of the community, because abortion stories, don't always sound so cookie cutter. And I think it's important that we, share stories from all kinds of people who are having abortions, and really talk about the way that stigma and the way that, we're treated when we want to access our own healthcare and we're told that we have to wait because our local government doesn't trust our decision making. For me, I was always raised with the goal of healing the world. And part of that really shows up in the work that I do, but part of it really showed up in the way that I work to heal myself. Having this abortion was a big step for me in my own personal freedom and my ability to make decisions, move forward in my career and my life, eventually meet a partner and get married, and hopefully bring children into a healthy and loving Jewish home. I had an abortion in the South, and oftentimes it felt like the conversation around abortion, when it was a religious conversation really was centered around Christianity, which is, a really important community in the South. But there's actually a lot of diverse communities in the South, including Jewish folks. And I think really this is an important conversation for us to be having, because there's actually a lot of beautiful language in our texts around abortion and menstrual regulation. And it's really frustrating that the stories are often limited to talking about Christianity and abortion. And I really encourage more folks in the Jewish community, more activists, to really be thinking about how we can support Tikkun Olam by joining these conversations with other faith leaders, with other faith communities, and including so much of our community's beautiful social justice work in these conversations about abortion and bodily autonomy. Especially experiencing this in the South, it was very clear that the conversation, really didn't include Jews. And then, of course, obviously, the conversation never was able to really talk about Jews of color. And so being a Jew of color living in the South, it's really important for me to share my story. And I grew up in a Jewish home. My mom was an activist, and, she was working on this issue in the 70s and 80s. And so in some ways, it definitely feels like inherited multi-generational work. My grandfather also, he was an obstetrician, and he would do tubal ligations for women who asked for them but couldn't afford them. And so this definitely feels like work that I've inherited and see as very much tied to my understanding of social justice as a Jew.
Thank you so much, Anise, for sharing your experience with us and helping us to understand the complexity of accessing abortion care. We're so grateful to hear your powerful words. Judaism permits abortion and sometimes requires it when the life of the pregnant person is at risk. With so many Jews organizing for abortion access and being one of the most pro-abortion faiths out there, it's important for us to understand why. What does our tradition say about abortion? In just 1 year, we've engaged over 1,500 rabbis and Jewish clergy from every denomination to teach and preach about abortion and Judaism. To dive a little deeper into Jewish tradition and values, we've invited a few of our friends from Rabbis for Repro to share why we as Jews must work to ensure anyone who needs it has access to safe, dignified, and affordable abortion care.
Our Jewish values compel us to support abortion access.
Access to abortion care is a fundamental necessity in this world, and ensuring that kind of body autonomy is essential for us as human beings, as feminists, and as Jews.
As a Jew and as a rabbi, the right to access medical care and to have access to safe and legal abortion is critical to the practice of our religion.
Abortion is about both an individual's right to choose and about their access to that right. Jewish values speak to both of these.
Our Judaism was not meant to live only within the walls of the sanctuary or inside of our homes, but it was meant to inform who we are in the world.
As a rabbi, I believe it is important to bring Jewish values and Jewish tradition into this fight.
For too long, there's been a narrative about what religion says about abortion, but we as Jews fight for reproductive health, rights, and justice, not despite our religious tradition, but because of it.
Fundamentally, what I want people to know is that Judaism permits abortion. Like so many other parts of our tradition, there are different ways to arrive at this conclusion, and that is part of the beauty.
The Jewish values Kavod Habriot and Selam Elohim teach us that we must honor the dignity and autonomy of each person. And that includes giving every individual the ability to make decisions about their bodies and their lives.
Judaism deeply values body autonomy. It believes in the agency, the dignity, and the autonomy of every single human being. And for this reason, it's essential that those who become pregnant have the option, spiritually, physically, medically, and financially, to access abortion and reproductive care however they need it in the ways that they choose it.
The Jewish value of pikuach nefesh, which means the preservation of human life, overrides virtually any other religious rule. Abortion in our tradition is permitted and even required if the life or health of the pregnant person is at stake.
And that may even be in a case where the mental anguish and the mental illness and the spiritual angst and pain that comes from a pregnancy or from carrying that baby to term, that may in fact be saving her life by allowing her and enabling her to have an abortion.
One core Jewish value is the idea that Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Bazeh, we are each responsible for each other. Or perhaps we might understand as we are woven together, we are bound together.
1 in 4 people who can get pregnant will have an abortion by age 45, and that includes members of all our communities.
One of our responsibilities as Jews and as human beings is to destigmatize abortion. To understand that abortion is a part of our lives, a part of our families' lives. You know someone, you are close to someone who has had an abortion.
We must take care of one another and create welcoming and supportive spaces for people to share their experiences around abortion.
We must create Jewish communities where we can talk openly about our experiences of abortion so there can be a sense of gratitude for access to reproductive health and not stigma for the need to access this important medical procedure.
As Jews, we are commanded to pursue justice and to work to create more just and whole societies.
Working to address structural inequities is core to a Jewish definition of pursuing justice.
We know that abortion access is already inequitable, that where you were born, your economic status, the color of your skin has an outsized impact on whether or not you have access to the reproductive health care that you desire.
We know that those who lack access to reproductive health care, disproportionately low-income people, people of color, young people, immigrants, and LGBTQ individuals, are more likely to live in poverty and to remain in abusive relationships.
We must not remain idle while barriers to health care place anyone's autonomy, well-being, safety, or dignity at risk.
Our Jewish community needs to work actively to ensure that anyone who wants it, every single person deserves access to comprehensive, affordable, compassionate, and equitable abortion care.
The Jewish community needs to mobilize, right? We need to be outspoken and actively work to ensure that anybody who needs access to a safe, legal abortion has that access.
Bans on abortion coverage go against our values.
Then we can't stay silent as reproductive rights are under attack.
It is time for the full Jewish community to join in this fight. If not now, when?
In the end, what I want is for Jewish communities and individuals to be able to answer the question, what did we do? What did I do to create a world in which all people can live lives that honor their inherent dignity and worth, from a place of groundedness, authenticity, and power? Fighting for reproductive justice is an opportunity to put Torah into practice and build that world.
Thank you, rabbis, for sharing these teachings with us. We want to reclaim the narrative on abortion and religion, recognizing that the majority of people of faith are supportive of access to abortion and see abortion as essential healthcare. For too long, we've allowed a small but loud group from the religious right to dominate the narrative. It's time we reclaim it. 73Forward will be providing Rabbis for Repro and any rabbi, clergy, and Jewish educator with even more resources and trainings designed especially for them in their role as spiritual and educational leaders. Now it's time for our second action of the night. We know Jewish clergy can help lead this fight from a distinctively Jewish perspective, and we already have over 1,500 people signed up. Help us reach 2,000 by inviting any Jewish clergy you know to sign on to our Rabbis for Repro pledge. A link is in the chat, including a template email. And if your rabbi is already signed up, make sure they know it means a lot to you, and shout out to all the rabbis who are here with us tonight. We appreciate you. And take it one step further. If that's not enough for your action tonight, continue educating yourself and your community about the connection between Jewish teachings and abortion justice by hosting a dialogue with a friend or small group using NCJW's new Torah of Reproductive Freedom toolkit, which you can also find in the chat.
I had my abortion. I was 18 years old. I was in a not very healthy relationship. I knew when I found out that I was pregnant that I wanted to get an abortion. So the first thing I did, I Googled like abortions. Like that was pretty much like the only thing that I knew to Google. I was first directed to a crisis pregnancy center. And when I spoke to the lady on the phone, I asked her about like terminating the pregnancy, and she said like they don't do that there, but I should come in for ultrasound and this and that. But I already knew that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't know what those organizations did at first, but I already knew I didn't want to get ultrasound. I just wanted to terminate the pregnancy. So I went to Planned Parenthood's website and I got an appointment with them. Once I got my appointment, I went in for my initial appointment. Now, the biggest barrier that I faced was transportation. Like I said, at the time I was 18, I was living with my grandmother. I worked a part-time job at a factory. I had just started college. So getting there without my family knowing was huge. Like that was like, and I was also depending on my abusive ex-boyfriend because he had a car, I didn't. So like getting there was a huge barrier. Another barrier that I faced was paying for it. So I had insurance under my mom, but obviously I couldn't use that insurance because she gets letters with like the statements and things like that when our insurance got billed. So obviously I couldn't use that. So when I went in for my first appointment, I got the ultrasound to see how far along I was. I thought I was, I thought I was like 6 weeks along or something like that. Ended up being 5 weeks along. So I had a little bit more time to figure out what I wanted to do than I thought I did. And then comes the part of getting to the second appointment. So I had to do 2 appointments because they don't allow you in the state of Indiana to go in to get it done in one appointment. They have to have a counseling appointment or whatever they call it, and then the appointment for your actual procedure. So like I said, the barrier that I was facing was money and transportation. Was not able to come in for my second appointment until I was 11 weeks. So if you think 5 weeks when I went in for my ultrasound, 6 weeks later, I was actually able to get it done. The only purpose of having them do 2 appointments is to try to persuade them otherwise. And it's just like, that was the biggest barrier that I faced when I was trying to get my abortion, was the waiting period in that 24 hours between the counseling appointment and the actual procedure. That is what, took me from what I wanted to do, which was get the pill, and then having to go and get the DNC, which that's not traumatic for everyone. But as an 18-year-old, I was terrified. I was, this was really the first time that I had sex and I got pregnant. All of that compounded on, hearing the horror stories that you find on Google about abortion and all this stuff. And like, I was terrified of getting the DNC. Like, I was like, what? They're gonna do what? So like that, like not having the choice to do that and having that waiting period there makes it so inconvenient. And it mainly makes it inconvenient for poor people and people of color. And that's the biggest like demographic that is trying to access these services and has the most trouble accessing these services. It just makes it 10 times harder for them. Not having the money to do it, I reached out to the Huge Abortion Fund here in my state, which I actually plan their fundraisers now every year. It's a great organization. If you don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. But yeah, so I reached out to them and they were able to get me funds to get my abortion taken care of. I paid out of pocket like $300 that me and my ex came up with together, which was really hard, making $10 an hour working part-time. But yeah, so I got in for my appointment and I got my procedure and everybody was so caring and so nice. And like I walked out and I was very happy. Man, my life would have taken a completely different trajectory if I wasn't able to get my abortion back in 2016. I wouldn't have gone back to school. Now I'm awaiting an acceptance letter from a nursing program here from a community college in Indianapolis. I wouldn't have been able to do that. I had dropped out of college right before I ended up getting my procedure because it was just so hard to balance getting to class and then trying to get to appointments or making phone calls to see if I could get funding. Like I remember the last class that I was in before I got my abortion, I had to step out and I was on the phone for like an hour trying to get funding for my abortion. When I went back in, class was over, obviously. So yeah, definitely that. Yeah, I just feel I have control of my life. Like, and that's ultimately what I wanted. I'm no longer in an unhealthy relationship. That ended very, very soon after I had my abortion. I was able to find courage to leave that situation. And I'm in a much better place because I was able to access that. Like I have a child depending on me. I'm not even financially stable, which is taking care of myself. So not having that also on top of, when COVID happened, I lost my job, you know what I'm saying? Like so many things like have happened that each time I'm so grateful that I was able to make that decision and see it through.
When most people think of at-home abortions, They think of unsafe practices, or an image of a hanger might come to mind. Today, this couldn't be further from the truth. Since the 70s, there have been amazing medical advances, and now medication abortion is quickly becoming the most common abortion option in the United States, accounting for 40% of abortions every year. These pills are designed to be taken from anywhere, which can help those unable to get to a clinic or take time off from work or home be able to access their constitutional right to an abortion. And they're safe. But right now, they are super expensive, and they have all sorts of ridiculous regulations that are not medically necessary. Part of this campaign, 73Forward, will be working to reduce these costs and remove any medically unnecessary regulations. Medication abortion is the safest and most effective path for most people, and that is why it is a crucial element of this campaign. With that in mind, please join me in welcoming NCJW's friend, Lori Chayton, an attorney at the ACLU's Reproductive Freedom Project, who will share how we can work to expand access to medication abortion to ensure this safe option for self-managed abortion care is available to those who need it.
Thank you for inviting me to join you today. I'm going to address litigation and advocacy efforts to lift medically unjustified restrictions on mifepristone, a drug used for early medication abortion and miscarriage care. In the past 21 years, more than 4 million people in the United States alone have used mifepristone, and medication abortion now comprises 60% of US abortions in the first 10 weeks of pregnancy. In the FDA-approved medication abortion regimen, mifepristone blocks a hormone necessary to sustain pregnancy, and a second drug called misoprostol, which is taken 24 to 48 hours later, causes uterine contractions to evacuate the uterus in a process that's very similar to an early miscarriage. FDA acknowledges that mifepristone's safety and efficacy are well established by research and experience, and that complications from the drug are exceedingly rare. Nevertheless, the agency imposes what's called a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, or a REMS, that severely restricts where, how, and from whom this medication can be obtained. Most notably, among these restrictions is a requirement that mifepristone can only be dispensed in person at a hospital, clinic, or medical office. No treatment has to happen at that time. It's just a requirement that the patient pick up the pill in person at a healthcare facility that stocks and dispenses the drug, even though they can receive all necessary evaluation and counseling by telemedicine and are permitted to self-administer the mifepristone tablet unsupervised at a location of their choice. All of that is to say that there's no medical justification for the requirement. It is nothing more than a barrier to access. Of the more than 20,000 FDA-approved drugs, mifepristone is the only one FDA requires patients to pick up in a clinical setting, even though they don't have to take it under clinical supervision. On behalf of leading medical organizations, individual physicians, and reproductive justice advocates, the American Civil Liberties has taken the FDA to court twice because the agency's restrictions on mifepristone violate federal statutory and constitutional law. We filed the first suit in 2017, asking the federal court to permanently block the REMS. That case was proceeding to judgment when, in January of 2020, the court put the case on hold pending the outcome of a Supreme Court case where the decision was expected in the summer of 2020. But there was a drumbeat of requests to the FDA from the medical community that intensified in the spring of 2020 as the pandemic set in and the in-person REMS requirements put patients and their families at risk of exposure to a deadly virus as they had to travel needlessly in person to a healthcare facility for the sole purpose of picking up a pill that they could put in their pocket and take home with them and take later. FDA refused to relax enforcement of the mifepristone REMS during the pandemic, even as the government implemented extensive measures to limit in-person contact in other circumstances and to encourage the use of telemedicine whenever possible, including for the provision of drugs such as opioids that carry far greater risk than mifepristone. So we filed a second lawsuit, this time COVID-related, asking a federal court on an emergency basis to block the FDA's enforcement of the in-person dispensing requirements for the duration of the federal public health emergency. This suit highlighted the particularly harsh impact of the REMS on people living with low incomes and people of color, the very people most severely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic from both a health and economic perspective. We won in the district court, but the Trump administration went all the way to the US Supreme Court twice over a period of 6 months to try to reinstate the mifepristone REMS in-person requirements. And they were ultimately successful in January of 2021 after Justice Barrett joined the court. But for 6 months, clinicians were able to offer care to eligible patients by telemedicine and deliver the medication to them by mail or delivery. Patients in rural areas who lived hours from the nearest abortion provider, and those in metropolitan areas who would have had to take public transportation, find childcare, take time away from much needed jobs, all the while facing the risk of exposure to a deadly virus as they traveled, were able to access abortion without leaving their homes. In addition, this injunction created enormous opportunity for innovation for the provision of medication abortion via telehealth in states that do not restrict such access. And critically, researchers were able to collect and publish data demonstrating the safety and efficacy of medication abortion without the mifepristone in-person REMS. The drumbeat from scientists, advocates, and public health officials urging FDA to listen to the science and lift the REMS never let up. And the Biden administration was facing litigation deadlines and the need to attempt to justify these REMS in multiple federal courts. In the face of overwhelming science, FDA announced this spring that it would cease enforcing the mifepristone in-person requirements for the duration of the public health emergency. The agency also announced that it had undertaken a comprehensive review of the mifepristone REMS. Leading scientific organizations have submitted extensive research. Medical journals have issued special publications focusing exclusively on this issue, and the plaintiffs in our litigation submitted extensive evidence from the lawsuit demonstrating that these requirements are not medically necessary and that they burden access in dangerous ways. Our litigation is now on hold until December 1st, with the hope that FDA will complete its review by the end of this year and will remove the mifepristone REMS completely, providing patients with broad access to the medication they need for early medication abortion and miscarriage care. Thank you again for having me with you today.
The inspiration just keeps on flowing this evening. Thank you so much, Lori, and everyone at the ACLU for that great summary and your tireless work as advocates. At times, all of this work can make people feel really helpless, especially when the news is discussing one abortion ban after another. But the fight isn't over. Another action step for everyone. Sign our petition to tell the Biden-Harris administration to permanently end unnecessary restrictions on medication abortion.
I remember the moment finding out that I was pregnant. I was like completely devastated as soon as I saw pregnant. At that point, I just like broke down because I knew that I had so much to look forward to, and I had recently just got accepted into this university. I like didn't really know what to do. But in the back of my head, the first thing that came into my mind was an abortion. And so once I was able to like finally get some words out, I was talking to my partner and he also suggested abortion. So since we were both on the same page, it was probably like 5 minutes after I found out that I was pregnant, he went searching online, learning how to get an abortion. And I remember even thinking, like, is abortion like even illegal or legal in the United States? I had no idea like what was going on because, you know, we didn't talk about that in school. We didn't talk about it with my family. So it was just something that I knew that was there and available, but I just didn't know if it was available to me. So my partner was the one that did all the researching to see if what resources we had, what options we had. So the first thing he found out was that under 18, you have to be over 18 to get an abortion without parental consent. And since I was 17 and since I didn't have a good relationship with my mom, I couldn't have an abortion. But luckily at the same time that he found out that I had to be 18 and over to have an abortion without parental consent, he also found this organization called Jane's Due Process, and that they specifically help minors get a judicial bypass, which is a way to get an abortion without parental consent. And so what that process looked like is you go to a court and you have to basically show that you're mature enough to get an abortion without parental consent, basically saying that, as minors, as anyone under 18, you're not mature enough to make this decision about your body. But then at the same time, if you wanted to get pregnant and have a child at 17 with no resources, that's totally okay. After that, I just reached out to the organization, Jane's Due Process, and they just helped me every step of the way. They gave me a list of things that I needed to do. The first thing being on the list was to go to the clinic and get an ultrasound. The judicial bypass process takes an average of 2 weeks. And that's if you're doing it, it just depends on so many things. Like that's if you have reliable transportation, that's if you're not in school, because if you're in school, then that would be a lot harder because you would only have to go, you'd either have to cut class or you'd have to go after class. And then, if you have strict parents, that's pretty much impossible, especially, when schools alert when a child's like not in class. The next thing was just to meet the attorney, and to meet the attorney, they kind of tell you what's the process going to be like, what you need to do, what you need to say, and they kind of give you a little bit of insight what the going in front of a judge looks like. And so going to that appointment, they told me everything that I needed to say, what I needed to include in my story, things to like refrain from, gave me a little bit of insight how the setup might be and what kind of questions they'll ask. And they did kind of give us a warning that they would be kind of invasive questions, all to, prove that you're mature enough to have this procedure. Since you're under 18, you're a minor. The way they have to do it is that they call you Jane so that they don't know your real name. And so that would mean that you have to go, earlier than all the other cases they're going to see that day. It felt like the whole entire time, it definitely felt like a very secretive process. And it definitely felt that I was a criminal because I was doing all of these things and kind of like going around the law. But that's kind of the whole point of the process, is to make you feel that you're doing something wrong and to make you feel that, just to get this one procedure, you have to go through all these steps. And so the process is made to make minors, just young people in general, feel that you shouldn't be doing this, and that just to confuse you to do that. And so that's definitely how I felt. I felt that I was doing something wrong because I had to go to the judge. I had to meet an attorney, which I've never met, a lawyer or attorney before. So it was definitely scary. Going to the appointment, I just knew that there was so much like on the line, and I was afraid that if I wasn't perfect, then this could be my future and it would be my fault because I didn't give the correct response. And so these are just things that were running through my head the entire time. The day before, the day of, the judge kept asking, questions like, oh, why couldn't you involve your parents? Or why couldn't you keep this child? And so just all really invasive questions, and questions that were really weird to talk to in front of a judge and somebody that like you don't know, a stranger. And so there were just questions along that line. And I try to really emphasize that I'm going to college. I have something to look forward to. I want to become a mechanical engineer. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to get a degree because a lot of my family members don't have that. And so I just want the opportunity to be able to do that and seek it out. At the end of it, I remember when we finished up, literally standing up on our way to go out, he said, he was like, in my religion, we don't believe that abortion is right. But as a judge, I have to remain impartial. And to me, that kind of meant that like he was going to say no, because he had to add like his opinion in there. And so I was just terrified because it kind of sounded like it was a no. And so after that, it was just really horrible because it was just waiting, seeing if I did get the bypass or not. And luckily I did get the bypass. And so once I got the bypass, the next thing was just to schedule the appointment with the clinic. And then that's what happened from there. That was the best decision I've ever made because I knew that I had a future ahead of me. I knew exactly what I wanted. And I didn't let the stigma of, the judge try to make me, I didn't let the judge try to make me feel that I was stupid and that I didn't know what I wanted, because I knew exactly what I wanted. And it stands to this day. I'm still here, extremely proud of that decision. And I'm at where I'm at because of my abortion.
Thank you so much, Veronica, for sharing your story with us. We must continue to advocate for access to abortion so that everyone in every zip code can make their own healthcare decisions with dignity. And that is exactly what we plan to do right now. We are going to take action while still on this call. Who is ready to join me? Hopefully all of you, because you're on this call. Okay, so here's the deal. There is a critical piece of legislation in Congress right now called the Women's Health Protection Act, or WIPA. WIPA would guarantee federal protections to abortion care, regardless of what each state decides and what the Supreme Court decide. This is our very best bet at safeguarding abortion access. And, we could actually do it if we convince enough senators to sign on to it. So I'm picking up my phone right now, and I'm going to tell my lawmakers, Senators Van Hollen and Cardin, that they have to support this bill. And I'm hoping you're going to join me. It's really easy to do. In the chat, you're going to find a link for a way to call your legislators and even a script that you can use to tell them to support WIPA. It is time for Congress to hear our voices. And for those of you whose senators already support WIPA, like mine, still call and tell them how important it is, because they should hear that this matters to you. Everyone's senators can be called. And then if you finish early and there's music still going on, you can use that time to email 5 of your friends and encourage them to call their lawmakers too. Or if you've got other people in your house, call them over and have them pick up the phone and call also. They need to hear from you, and we can do this together.
I am a non-binary transgender person who got an abortion in Texas. I got my abortion in 2017. I was unemployed at the time, and I was living with 3 other people in a 3-bedroom apartment. I literally didn't have room, to have a baby, to, house a baby, and I also wasn't in a place emotionally to parent. I also knew, since I was actively looking for work, that my work search would be a lot harder if I were pregnant, because there is a lot of discrimination against pregnant people when looking for work. I also had some health challenges at the time that would have made it very challenging for me to carry to term. And it was really important to me to end my pregnancy on my own terms rather than wait for a medical emergency. In Texas, there are a lot of restrictions on abortion. At the time I got my abortion in 2017, there was actually in place, you had to have a medically unnecessary ultrasound, and then you had to wait 24 hours between the ultrasound and the procedure itself. Texas is a large state with a lot of space between clinics. So for some people who don't live near a clinic, that could necessitate an overnight stay or 2 really long car trips. I actually live in a city, so I was able to pretty easily get to the abortion clinic. I also had a support system around me. I had emotional support when I was going through everything. And I also had a ride to the clinic for my procedure. Because I got the surgical procedure, I was sedated and wasn't able to drive myself home. In addition to the waiting period, you also have a counselor who gives you information that's medically inaccurate. And you basically have to, sit there and go through that counseling session before you can go ahead and get your abortion. Seeking care as a non-binary person was a little bit challenging because the field of abortion care and gynecological care in general is so gendered. Like, the patient is always assumed to be female, and this is reflected everywhere from clinic decor to aftercare instructions. So, I mean, picture yourself picking up the aftercare packet for a surgery you just went through, and all of the instructions assume that you are a different gender than you are. I mean, in an emotional space where I was already feeling vulnerable, that sort of thing just kind of adds to the difficulties I'm going through at the time. So the clinic I sought treatment at, everyone was very compassionate, but I could tell that not all staff members understood transgender issues. And I could tell that the clinic wasn't prepared to have a transgender patient. Like, there was no field to put my pronouns, so people didn't know how to refer to me. And I had to put down my legal name because they didn't really have a field for the name that I actually went by at the time. They did their best, they marked it on my chart, but because they didn't have a field for it, people missed it. And again, it's a situation where I'm seeking medical care that, I'm feeling really vulnerable. I've just come through a crowd of people screaming at me and calling me a murderer. And then I get into this setting and I'm called by the wrong name and people refer to me with the wrong pronouns. And so it's just a bad emotional experience that, it's just like a bad emotional experience kind of on top of the difficulties of accessing care in the first place. To all the trans folks out there, if you've had an abortion, I just want you to know that you're not alone. There are a lot of trans people who have had abortions, and I hope by sharing my story, I can help destigmatize it so that we can talk about this more freely. I also want you to know that getting an abortion doesn't invalidate your gender. Getting an abortion doesn't make you a woman. Only you can determine what your gender is. I think an important thing to remember is that abortion is healthcare. People get abortions because they need them, and it's important to make sure that abortion is always accessible. People have all sorts of reasons for getting abortions, and they're all valid. And I think we need to, make sure that the government isn't intervening and picking and choosing who gets to have an abortion for what reason. And in the words of Renee Bracey Sherman, everyone loves someone who's had an abortion. That includes you. I hope people get involved with this issue because protecting abortion access means protecting the future of everyone in your community who you care about. It means protecting the health and safety of folks who can get pregnant. It means empowering people to choose when and how they have families.
Time has flown by tonight, and now we're ready to share our final action of the evening. And this is an action I'm particularly excited to take with my friends and family. So we're inviting all of you to gather a group of your friends, families, or communities to host a 73Forward circle. All you need to do is gather at least 5 people, maybe your friends, maybe your family, maybe some colleagues, to commit to taking action as part of 73Forward. First up is gathering your friends to have courageous conversations, exploring your thinking and experiences on reproductive health, rights, and justice. There are conversations you can choose from about your reproductive journeys, tech studies on Judaism and abortion, and a conversation reflecting on your own relationship to abortion. And I'll just say, ever since I started at National Council of Jewish Women and began working on the issue of abortion justice, more and more people I know have come to me with their stories of abortion, people I'm close with, but I didn't know their stories beforehand. And the fact is, we all love someone who has had an abortion. By talking about abortion, our reproductive journeys, and learning Jewish texts on these topics, we get to help reduce the stigma on abortion in our communities. Help us do that by committing to form a 73Forward circle. And if you've completed all these actions tonight, we want to celebrate your commitment to fighting for abortion access with some very special 73Forward swag. So check out the chat for details on how to claim your free swag if you've taken all the action items tonight. Unfortunately, we're coming up to the end of our time together tonight. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to make a difference and already took actions to work towards all pregnant people being able to make decisions about their own bodies. Before we go, I want to take one more moment for a particularly exciting announcement. It's my privilege to introduce NCJW's newly hired co-directors of the 73Forward campaign, Shira Zemmel and Glenn Northern. We're so thrilled to welcome them to our NCJW community and for them to bring their incredible leadership and expertise to this movement. Shira and Glenn.
Hi, I'm Shira Zemmel.
And I'm Glenn Northern. We are so excited to be co-directing 73Forward,
the largest proactive faith-based mobilization effort focused on increasing abortion access.
We are at a critical crossroads. It's up to each of us to make sure the path that our nation traverses reflects our values and beliefs and leads to access and justice.
Today, I'm thinking of my grandfather, who was an OBGYN in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He practiced before and after Roe and cared deeply about women's access to reproductive health care. I wish he was here today to see this Jewish communal movement mobilizing to ensure on-the-ground access to abortion care for anyone who needs it, full stop.
I will never forget this past Rosh Hashanah, hearing our family's rabbi in Kensington, Maryland, passionately speak from the pulpit about the haunting Texas abortion ban that pits neighbor against neighbor in the burgeoning copycat laws. He spoke of beautiful, deep, abiding Jewish values and courage that compel us to act in the face of injustice. Our congregation was spellbound and energized. I was moved to tears.
Each of us feels in our hearts the gravity of this moment, and we know what's at stake. And so we are called to take action and build the movement for reproductive freedom that will make the difference our country so greatly needs. 73Forward is our campaign, all of us together. 73Forward is visionary in that we will tap deep into our abiding passion and leverage our collective power to make access to abortion and reproductive care a reality on the ground for all those who want it.
I want to be able to tell my son Aaron and my future grandchildren that I did everything I could at this historic time, that we came together to do what was right and necessary and changed the world.
And I want to be able to tell my kids, Zev and Orly, one day, that when the going got tough, we, together with our partners, raised our moral voices in the public square, and proudly stood strong for religious freedom and access and dignity for all.
Standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, together we can change abortion access and abortion justice. So spread the word, talk to your friends, family, neighbors. Together, we are going to lead a groundswell that will reclaim the narrative.
We can't wait to move forward together.
Thanks, Shira and Glenn. We're thrilled to have you both with us leading this fight. And thank you to all our storytellers and speakers who presented tonight. We appreciate your wisdom and experiences. We know that everyone deserves equal access to the resources needed to control their body, family, and future. And that includes access to affordable, comprehensive, equitable, and compassionate abortion care. And that our Jewish values command us to do this work and ensure the dignity of all people in their reproductive journeys. This fight is far from over, and this campaign is just getting started. We will be adding resources, actions, and more to our website in an ongoing way until our work of ensuring that everyone can make their own decisions about their own bodies is complete. Please continue to check out 73forward.org. And I hope tonight reignited you to speak up and take action. Rest up tonight because our journey continues tomorrow. This is an all hands on deck moment. We need each of you. Thank you so much for your commitment and welcome to 73 Forward.